In this video, we'll be testing the Snow Peak Alpha Breeze tent for its ease of use, amount of space, windows, doors, rain protection, quality, and much, much more. Out of the box, you'll get 2 fork guidelines for the awning, the rainfly, which I've attached the other 7 guidelines to, so altogether you should have 9 guidelines. You get instructions, seam sealant, 20 stakes, the stake bag, the overall carry bag for everything, the tent body, the pole bag, and 6 poles. First up, this is not the setup video, which is a separate video. This is just a very quick summary of the setup in case you want to know roughly how it works. First, grab the blue ridge pole and sleeve it into the middle of the tent. Then insert each end of the ridge pole into each of the 2 A-poles before securing the ends of the A-poles into the 4 corners of the tent. The last tent pole is the red one, which goes at the front. Secure both ends to the middle tent grommets. All the grommets and poles are color-coded, so it was pretty user-friendly. Next, pull the rainfly over the tent and secure it to the 6 buckles around the tent base. Even the rainfly is color-coded, so that was great. Finally, stake down the back and front vestibules, guy out the 7 guidelines, and your tent is fully set up. Altogether, this entire process took me about 19 minutes to set up, but notice we haven't set up the awning yet, so if you want to do that, that's the next test. To set up the awning, we need 4 stakes, the 2 awning poles, and the 2 fork guidelines. Secure the pole tip into the grommet at each corner, then slip the guideline on top of that. Secure it tightly by looping it twice. Stand each pole upright, stake down both ends of the fork guideline, adjust the guideline, and then adjust each pole again. To set up the entire awning, this takes about 4 minutes, but it's worth it because it provides a decent amount of shade when the sun is really hot. It took me about 1 minute and 15 seconds to break down the awning, and about 13.5 minutes to pack away the tent itself and get it back into the carry bag. As I mentioned a minute ago, for the details I have a separate video with loads of instructions and tips to help you set up and pack away your tent more easily. Moving into our spaciousness tests, let's start with the peak height of the tent. At the center we have a peak height of 71 3/4 inches. And since I'm quite short, only about 5'3", this was more than enough space for me to stand upright. I could stand upright even with pads or mattresses in the tent. Since we want to look at not just the peak height, but the overall livable space as well, I also measured the extended peak heights everywhere inside this tent. To the right and left of the tent, we have heights coming in at 66.5 inches and 65 3/4 inch. And because I'm not very tall, I could stand up everywhere here as well. The reason there is this extended height is because of the ridge pole that we talked about in the first setup test. This goes at the top of the tent and is propped up by the 2 A-poles by the sides. At the front of the tent as well, we have the red pole, which gives us even more of an extended height at the front as well. The center of the front measures about 65.5 inches in height. To the left and right, we have heights of 58.5 inches on both sides. I could stand up at the center of the front, but the sides were a little less tall, so I had to bend my knees a bit. Overall though, I found that this tent offers plenty of livable space, and I could walk around all these areas that you're seeing on screen right now. Now, from the outside of the tent, here are the heights that I just measured in case you need that info, and you can see all the extended peak heights and quite a lot of livable space in there. Just take note that the back of the tent slopes off quite a bit, because this is meant to be like an A-frame tent. For the base area, I first measured the width across the tent, and that came in at about 101 inches. Next, I measured the length from the back to the front, and that came in at 106.5 inches. Overall, that's a total base area of about 74.7 square feet. If you want to fit 4 pads into this tent, here's what it'll look like. Since even the width across the tent is over 100 inches, it was more than enough space for both these double pads, and I'll give you the size of both. There was even a few inches of leftover space at the sides of each pad and in the middle as well. When I pushed both pads to the side, I found that I got an extra 10.5 inches of leftover width, plus 29 inches of leftover length at the front. This was more than enough space for another 20 to 25 inch pad, so this tent can actually fit 5 pads or 5 people if you set them up this way. With 4 to 5 pads in the tent, you have to sleep shoulder to shoulder like this. But thanks to the A-poles at the 2 sides of the tent, you get pretty vertical walls here, and you can lie down or sit up without feeling too claustrophobic. On the other hand, in most other tents, these walls would be right above you and makes it feel very tight and much smaller than the snow peak. If a 4 to 5 pad sizing is a bit too cramped for you, so you're planning to use this tent for just 2 to 3 people instead, here's roughly what that looks like. Take note that the length of this tent isn't long enough, so you'd be able to fit only 1 queen bed and not 2. To test this, I pushed the bed to the side and measured the leftover space. That's 21 inches in width for gear storage at the side, and at the length we've got 41 inches in length, which is not enough for a queen or even a full-size bed. But you can fit a single bed in there if you want to. I recommend not fitting them in this way because when you sleep near the back, the walls will slant quite a bit and it feels very cramped. So I would fit the queen in like this, so you can take advantage of the vertical walls at both sides again. When you do so, you get 23 inches of leftover room in width and 39.5 inches in leftover length. That's enough space for the single as well, even in this configuration. Overall, the base area and sizing of this tent gives you plenty of options. Back in test 3, we saw the awning setup, and below the awning we have the front vestibule. Here are the dimensions. The longer length is the same as the width of the tent, and that's 101 inches. The shorter length at the front is 79 inches, and the width comes in at about 42 inches. That's a total vestibule area of 26.25 square feet. I also measured the height of the awning in case you needed that info, and that came in at 66.5 inches near the tent. At the end of the awning, that was 65 inches, so because I'm not very tall again, I was able to stand up perfectly fine. As for the sizing, here's what the front vestibule could fit. Here are 2 Helinox chair 1s plus a Helinox table, and all these fit perfectly under the shade when the awning is set up. But when we remove the awning, this happens. Notice that because the awning slants downwards the whole way, when I'm sitting inside on the chairs, it's quite a tight fit. So if you're bigger than me, this will be very uncomfortable. There was also not much standing height in the awning. The peak comes in at 66 inches, but that's all you've got. To set up the front vestibule from scratch, you need 2 stakes, and I recommend staking down the loop that isn't attached to the awning fabric in the middle. If you don't want to set up the awning, you can just roll the fabric up and attach it to the top with these 2 toggles, so you'd have plenty of space to use your chairs and tables. One small con here is that you can't tie back these sides of the tent because there weren't any toggles for you to do so. As for the zippers on the vestibule, these are YKK zippers, and there are 2 of them for each zipper track. They're mostly snag-free and very durable, but I still recommend not stressing the zipper and using a 2-handed zip for at least zipping up the last zipper track, because otherwise it'll keep catching on the rain flap. Moving away from the front vestibule, we'll talk about the back one next. This needs only 1 stake, and I recommend using the left stake loop to stake it down. This way you'd be able to open like half the back vestibule, but still leave the guy line in place. If you use the other stake loop and you want to open half the vestibule, you'd have to unstake the guy line as well. Or you can just open up the entire vestibule and tie both sides back using the toggles provided for each side. The back vestibule is much smaller than the front. It's triangle shaped and measures about 21 inches in width. Since the base of the triangle is just the width of the tent, 101 inches, this brings the back vestibule size to 7.4 square feet, which is 3.5 times smaller than the front vestibule, so it's best to use this mainly for wet gear storage. This back vestibule has only 1 zipper, but it's also YKK and completely snag-free as long as you have 1 side staked out. Next, we'll look at windows, and first we have to tie back the rainfly. You can do this from the outside, which is easier because the toggles are not like color-coded, so it's not easy at first to tell which is which. When opening this side of the rainfly, the toggle is up top, near the guy line. Then when you open the back of the rainfly, the toggle for both ends is a bit further down. This last side of the rainfly is up top again, near the guy line. Then just go back inside the tent and open up all the windows from the inside. Each window also comes with 2 toggles for stowing the fabric away. There are 4 windows in this tent, 1 on each wall. I liked how big they were, especially the front window. For exact dimensions, the back window measures 50 inches in length by 49.5 inches in width. For each of the triangle side windows, that's 45 inches at the bottom and 36 inches at the side. The front window is the biggest, measuring 60 inches in length by 50 inches in width. And the front window is extra big, so if you want the window open, but you want a bit of privacy at the same time, you can shrink the size of the open window with these 2 extra toggles here. The back window has the same feature as well. There are no official specs of the bug netting, but based on my eyeballing and the feel of it, I don't think it's small enough to keep out no-see-ums, only bigger bugs like mosquitoes. And one thing I really liked about this tent is that if you don't want to get out of the tent, you can unzip the rainfly and open all the windows from the inside. It's a bit harder to do so, but still very manageable. One pro tip here is that if you expect any rain, do not open the full back rainfly from the outside, just part way like I did here, because you cannot restake the stake loop and the guy lines from the inside. As for the window zippers, each has 2 zippers. That's those on the inner track. The outer ones are for the doors. A small improvement here is that these zippers can be color-coded, so you won't pull the wrong one, but after a while you kind of get used to it, I guess. All these zippers are YKK. They were very snag-free, even for the biggest window at the front. Another thing I really liked about this tent were the doors. When the windows are open, you don't even have to remove the fabric from the toggles to open the doors. You can just bunch up the mesh and toggle it away. This uses the other loop we saw from the outside, but you use the same toggle for the fabric and the mesh. I found the attention to detail amazing here, and every single one of the doors have these extra loops. Or if the windows are closed, you can just bunch up the mesh and fabric together and tuck them away together. The front door is huge, it can fit 3 of me, and for exact details it measures 60 inches or 5 feet in length, 53 inches in width, and stands at 5 feet tall. So unfortunately, you're still going to have to duck when getting in and out of the tent. As for the other 3 windows, if you're wondering, yes, they can all be turned into doors as well. And this tent has a whopping 4 doors for plenty of cross ventilation, and this is really quite amazing. The back door measures 50 inches in width, 50.5 inches in length, but just 49 inches from the ground to the top of the door, so even lower than the front door. As for each of the side doors, that's 47 inches at the bottom, 36 inches at the side, and 48 inches from the ground to the top, so these are the smallest doors. Like the window zippers, all the doors also have 2 zippers each on the outer track this time. These are YKK and very snag-free. For storage, there are 6 pockets in the tent. I was expecting a lot more though, because expensive tents tend to have much more storage options. Each measures only about 7 inches in length, 5.5 inches in width, and can fit no more than a book in each pocket. As for loops, there are 3 of them in the tent. These are all closed felt loops. We're going to look into waterproofing now, and the first feature this tent has is a tub floor. The only seams on the floor are the mid-tent grommets, the corners, and the seam across the floor. This tub extends 7.5 inches off the ground, which was more than enough protection, as you'll see in just a bit. As for seam taping, all the seams you just saw on the floor, these were all taped. The taping extends up to the top of the tub floor and stops there, and anything else above isn't taped. As for the rainfly, every single seam was taped perfectly, and you can see the outline of the seam taping here. The next waterproofing feature are the 2 vents for some ventilation in the heavy rain, and each of them have a kickstand to keep the vent open. These cannot be accessed from the inside of the tent, so you can just leave them open from the get-go. And from the inside, unzip them and tie up the fabric with the toggle. Each of these vents measure about 25 inches in length by 15 inches in width and come in this triangle shape. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there are 2 layers of mesh to each vent, which helps to prevent leaking, I think. And if you're camping in colder weather and don't need the vent, you can always zip it up. Now, to test all the waterproofing features, I put the snow peak through about 1 hour of heavy rain, followed by many hours of moderate, not so heavy rain. After the heavy rain stopped, I checked in on the tent, and here are the results. First, I checked the corner seams and found that they did not leak at all. The tub floor was also great at keeping out rain with no leaks too. I also checked the tent grommet stitching, no leaks as well. Next, I opened up the vent from the inside and found that the vent mesh was dry, so no water would have gotten in anyway. I'm not sure if you can see this, but the first layer of mesh from the outside had drops of water on it, which protected the second layer I'm touching now from the rain, so I guess maybe that's why it needed 2 layers. I also opened up the doors to check on the rainfly and found that it was dry from the inside too, so no leaks through the rainfly. Finally, I lifted the rainfly and found that the height of the tub floor was more than enough to stop all the water from splashing onto the fabric above. Overall, this tent was absolutely perfect in the heavy rain, especially considering how many hours it went through. The next rain test is for the awning. If you noticed in the middle of the front of the awning, there's an extra grommet. This is for you to fit a guy line. Then when you secure the guy line to the ground, the awning would form this funnel-like thing, and this is meant to prevent water from pooling at the top. The awning also has a second rain feature. There's a triangle webbing with a buckle near the front door, so what you have to do is to secure both ends of the buckle and tighten as much as possible. What this does is to scrunch up the rainfly here and raise it higher so that in light rain will drip off the rainfly instead of pooling. So I tested the awning in heavy rain, and you can see the funnel at the front working a little bit to drain some of the water. But unfortunately, in just a few minutes of heavy rain, the water will pool so much faster than the funnel can drain. The entire awning will sag, drip onto whatever you have below the awning, and then completely collapse after a while. So the awning is meant only for light rain and not moderate to heavy rain. As for materials, the flooring is made of super thick 300 denier Oxford polyester. The rainfly is made of 75 denier polyester taffeta. The DWR coating is great, and it even has UV resistance. The tent body is 68 denier polyester taffeta. The poles are made of aircraft grade 6061 duralumin, which has a very high strength to weight ratio, and these poles also felt super thick and beefy. Snow Peak updated the Alpha Breeze after I bought my tent in mid-2025, and here are the changes I noticed. For the rainfly, they made it stronger polyester ripstop compared to polyester taffeta. For the tent body, that's also thicker, from 68 to 75D, and also polyester ripstop. They also improved the flooring. Oxford polyester is a less strong and cheaper material, and nylon ripstop in the new version is more expensive and stronger. But because of how much thinner the 40 denier flooring is, you might want to buy a cheap ground sheet for the underneath of your tent to protect it. And I think mainly because of the flooring change, the weight of the new Snow Peak is now 1.5 pounds less than what mine weighed. Another difference I noticed is also about a 4-inch increase in peak height. The guy lines are regular short cord with an easy-to-use tensioner. The stakes are your regular shepherd hook stakes, and stitching is good all around the tent. And FYI, this is made in China and meets all flammability specifications. Now, if you remove the rainfly on hot days, here's what the inner tent looks like. If you open up all the windows as well as the triangle vents, I'd say this tent has overall maybe 35% mesh. If you enjoy stargazing though, there's no mesh roof, but otherwise ventilation through the big mesh panels is pretty good. And for even more ventilation, you can even open all the mesh panels too. For portability, the Snow Peak tent has a pack size of 28 inches in length by 13 inches in width and 11 inches in height. Here's what it looks like beside a 2-person Coleman Sundom tent and a 1-liter Nalgene bottle. The carry bag has these short shoulder straps, which should be longer, and the total pack tent weighs about 23.6 pounds. The Snow Peak Alpha Breeze is rated as a 4-person tent. This is from REI where I bought mine. So to show overall performance and pros and cons, I wanted to compare the Snow Peak against other 4-person tents that I've tested. Now here's a quick list of the other 4P tents: the Marmot Tungsten, the Teton Mountain Ultra, the Alps Mountaineering Lynx, the Kelty Wireless, and the Coleman Sundom, along with the MSRPs of each tent. For the rest of the pros and cons, how I compared the Snow Peak is by taking all the data you just saw in the testing and comparing it to the average of all the other tents here, so we can find out whether our very expensive Snow Peak beats out all these other less expensive tents. So here's what you'll find out. The first test we went through was the setup test, and the Snow Peak took double the time of the average 4-person tent. That's because it has way more features, like double the number of poles, double the number of guy lines, 50% more tent-based grommets, a much bigger rainfly, and so on. Actually, if you're not tall like me, I recommend not setting this up on your own because the rainfly was quite difficult to put up. When you pull the rainfly over and then you try to inch it over bit by bit, it falls off, sometimes multiple times before you can finally get it up. But a 2-person setup would have made it so much easier. As for the pack away, it also took 50% more time. And all these timings here do not include the awning, that's just the tent itself. But here's where the Snow Peak starts doing really well. All the other tents I tested did not come with awnings, but the Snow Peak does. If you're wondering, this takes an additional 4 minutes to set up and 1 minute 15 seconds to pack away. On top of that, this is the only tent that I've seen that gives you everything you need to set up the awning. You get both upright poles, the 2 fort guy lines, and necessary stakes for the fort guy lines. Most other tents here don't even give you enough stakes or guy lines for the actual tent itself. The next pro is that the Snow Peak has a much taller than average peak height. The newer Alpha Breeze has 4 inches more than mine. Mine was slightly less tall at 72 inches, but this already gave me not just enough room to stand upright at the center, but I could even walk around the tent a little bit. If you've never used a 4-person tent before, you typically cannot stand up in it. The third pro is that the Snow Peak has a much bigger base area as well. For the inner tent base itself, that's already 18.3 square feet more than average, which is a whopping 32% more. In fact, it was so big that I could fit 5 pads into the tent, not just 4 like average. So basically, you're guessing a 5-person tent here. In terms of queen bed sizing, you can fit a single bed beside the queen, whereas most tents can only fit 1 queen and 1 pad. Still on base area, the Snow Peak has 23% more square footage in its vestibule than the average tent. And this gives you overall almost 25 square feet more, or 30% more overall base area. Moving on to features, this tent has 4 times the number of windows and double the number of doors, so it's super feature-rich. I mean, each person practically has their own door, which is so cool, and it was also really good for ventilation. If you camp not just in summer, but also colder weather, this tent is great because you can actually zip up all the mesh so the heat won't escape, and the rest of the tents here cannot do that. As for pockets, some tents do come with 6 pockets, but mostly with 4. I didn't color code this though, because the Snow Peak's pockets were really not that big, so it didn't seem like too much of a pro. And some tents do have 2 vents, but some have none at all. The Snow Peak is also much better in the rain than most of these other tents. It took hours and hours of moderate rain, followed by 1 hour of heavy rain, with no leaks at all. On the other hand, my cheap Coleman tents tend to stay dry for only about 30 minutes. Elks Mountaineering comes in at about the 1 hour mark. Kelty and Marmot had slightly damp rainflies at the 2 hour mark. The Snow Peak is also made from very high quality materials, complete with totally snag-free YKK zippers, higher strength to weight ratio nylon ripstop for the flooring, thicker and stronger polyester ripstop for both the canopy and the rainfly, and the poles are aircraft grade aluminum too. But here's where we get back into the cons, and this tent weighs double the weight of your average 4-person tent. And the price tag on the Snow Peak is also like 2.5 times the cost as well. But is it 2.5 times better than the average 4-person tent? Considering that the Snow Peak did better in 17 tests, while the average tent did better in only like 4 tests, I would say that yeah, it's more than 2.5 times better. In fact, so far, I think the Snow Peak is easily the best 4-person tent that I've ever tested. I really enjoyed using it, and I highly recommend it. Now, if you want to see how the Snow Peak compares to other camping tents, not just 4-person tents, check out this video on screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in that one.